Welcome back. I'm delighted that you are here with me for the Godly Impact podcast. If you have been around here for a while, then you know that either at the beginning or end of every episode, I say this statement. You have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. And that is absolutely true. Question is, what are you going to do with that impact? Are you going to use it for good? Are you going to maximize it? Are you going to just be kind of mediocre with it? Hopefully, definitely not decide to use it for anything that is bad. Well, we have been in a series called You're in the People Business, and today is the final episode in this series. Because no matter what you're doing, you're in the people business. If you're a parent, you are definitely in the people business. If you're running a small business, if you're an administrator of a school, if you are a Sunday school teacher, if you're a pastor of a church, if you are running your own company or you're part of a mega company, you're in the people business. And if you are going to thrive, not just in terms of those relationships that are very close to you. So if you're in management, it's not just about your direct reports. It's also about your customers. And this applies in every kind of relationship. Because if you want to survive, well, there's some things you can just get by with. But if you want to thrive, there are 6 essential elements that you need. Just like there are 6 essential elements that we have to have in order to continue to stay alive here on this earth. So a very quick recap. The first one, the oxygen of all relationships, is empathy. Now that is not just a feeling of compassion or kindness for someone when they're going through a difficult time. Empathy is so much more than that. It is being with someone. It's we're in this together, not just during the hard times, but as a way of practice, as a way of life, as a way of operations. And then what we looked at was the element of sulfur, the need to have a way to repair when tears happen, because they just will. And then we talked about expectations and the importance of getting to expectations. Those are the base layer of the communication pyramid, and very seldom do we get to the level of expectations in our communications, especially when there's a conflict. But when we do, that makes all the difference. You see, because our expectations reveal what we truly believe about our rights and our responsibilities, and about other people's rights and responsibilities. And then we talked about the hydrogen of relationships, and that's curiosity. And when we combine curiosity with empathy, which is, we have to do that, and that's why we start with empathy. Then when we work our way down and we combine that with curiosity, we get something entirely new. Just like when we take oxygen and we combine it with hydrogen, we get an entirely new compound called water. But unfortunately, hydrogen, the curiosity to be able to seek to know and to understand someone else, can also be misused. So we want to make certain that we are using that first and foremost to know ourselves. Because sometimes we're pretty focused on not really knowing ourselves. So the importance of remaining curious from a position of humility. And then in last week, what we talked about was the nitrogen of a relationship, and that is identity. And really try to focus on how identity is formed, but pointing out that we can never really shape our identity totally separate from everybody else. Identity is only shaped within the context of a larger group. We can't really answer who am I unless we can also answer who are we. We are designed to be in connection with other people. And when we try to live as if that's not true, well, that just does not go well. Sometimes we hit the impact of that, the effect of that pretty quickly, and other times the effect of that might not show up for years or decades, but eventually it does show up. So in this last episode in this series, what's the other chemical element that is necessary for life on Earth? Well, here you go. It's carbon. That's right, carbon. It's the chemical backbone or the spine of all known life on Earth. Let that sink in. Carbon is the chemical backbone or the spine of all known life on Earth, not just people, but all known life. It is the fourth most abundant element in the universe, and it's the second most abundant in your body if you are measuring that in terms of mass. Another interesting fact about carbon is that more than all the other elements, it combines to form more compounds than all of the other elements combined. That's right. Carbon is an essential part of our world. Now, perhaps you recall, maybe you recall this from your school days, or you are in an industry where you're like, okay, now I deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And that's something called the carbon cycle. And that is when we take the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere and it's converted by photosynthesis into carbohydrates by plants. And then plants get eaten by people and animals. And then it goes through this process of oxidation and metabolism. And what gets produced? Carbon dioxide. Where does that carbon dioxide go? It goes back into the atmosphere. And so this cycle is one of the most important cycles in all of the biological systems and processes that we have on Earth. Now, carbon is very unique in many ways, but one is which you can take carbon and it can become a diamond. I mean, that's what a diamond is. If you have a diamond in a wedding band or maybe a necklace or maybe it's a bracelet that belonged to your great-grandmother, whether it's a teeny tiny diamond or it's a very large one, you know what you're looking at? You're looking at carbon. That's it. If you pick up a pencil and you look at the lead in that pencil, guess what you're looking at? Well, you're looking at something that has a lot of carbon in it. So what makes the difference between the carbon that shows up as a diamond in an expensive piece of jewelry and the carbon that shows up as pencil lead? It's how that carbon is connected at the molecular level and the pressure that it undergoes. And I think that's fascinating. And I want to tie back to, last week what I tried to emphasize was that identities don't get shaped in isolation. And the need to be able to create within your family, your organization, a sense of branding. Like, who are we? Like, specifically, who are we? Well, that's incredibly important because it means that we own our interdependence. We are connected to other individuals, to other people groups. And in the same way, what gives a diamond its tremendous strength is how it is connected at the molecular level. It's how it is bonded. And this is what makes it one of the reasons why it turns into this precious gem and not into lead to be put into a pencil. And the pressure that carbon is put under also plays a part in it turning into something very precious versus something very ordinary. None of us like to sign up to be put in situations of pressure. And I'm not advocating that we ever artificially force ourselves into positions of pressure. But if you live life very long, you will find you don't have to go looking for pressure. It will find you. And it's more important that we don't try to invent these escape routes from pressure, but we let pressure do the work that it needs to do in order to turn us into the diamonds that we can become. So what does this mean in terms of how does this connect to, okay, what does that mean in terms of human relationships? I mean, okay, there's carbon, I get that, but this is an analogy, Stephanie. What are you really trying to tell me? What I'm trying to tell you is I believe that the carbon of human relationships is purpose. It's purpose. It's meaning. It's significance. It's answering the question, why am I here? Why are we here? Why does this exist? Why does this company exist? This department? Why my family? What is the meaning to my life? Purpose by default will decay. We use carbon to measure how alive or dead something is. We also can use purpose in the same way. When we look at people that don't have a purpose, even though they might still be breathing, we kind of look at them and go, yeah, they're not really fully alive. Well, also, when we look at people that do have a purpose, and oftentimes those are the people that we are drawn to because we recognize now that person is really alive. Same thing that happens at the individual level also happens at the macro level and in terms of businesses. You take a business that has lost or never had its purpose to begin with, and eventually that purpose is not going to succeed either at all or to the degree that it had the potential to succeed. I think that people need purpose on two levels. One is we need to have purpose when it relates to that big question, the big meaning. What is the purpose of life? Why are any of us here? What's all of this about? We need to have that question answered for us. But that's not the only question that we need answered. We need something that is more specific to us as individuals. Now, as a Christian, as a person of faith, my purpose ultimately, which is the same purpose that God desires for every human being to have, and that is to know him, to love him. Jesus summed it up in two great commandments: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then what's the second? To love your neighbor as yourself. That's connection. That's interdependence. So we have this total dependence on God, and then we have out of that then comes this interconnectedness that we have with other people. And have you noticed that people can tend to put a lot of pressure on us? Okay. Well, we have a choice. We can keep trying to run away from pressure, or we can step into and embrace the healthy pressures that occur in life. Now, I'm not talking about remaining in unhealthy situations where there is pressure that is not going to form us into diamonds. It's going to crush us into smithereens. There is a difference with that. But there is an appropriate amount of pressure that comes because of our interconnectedness with other people that does produces diamond traits, diamond character, diamond level outcomes. So that's true for us, all of us on a big picture level, but we also need to be able to have purpose that's specific to us. And this is where we each have our own unique opportunities and abilities and gifts, and there's beauty in that. And we're able to appreciate and to recognize the use and the development of other people's gifts. As a speaker and as a writer, I have to define, and this is not something that I just woke up one day and all of a sudden it just popped into my head. There was a long process of sorting through a lot of different objectives to say, what's my purpose going to be as a speaker and as a writer? Because I've had the great fortune in life to be involved in a variety of different things. I've been a learner my entire life. And as I've had the opportunity to learn in different areas and to build bodies of knowledge and experience in different areas, then one of my challenges has been, okay, what am I going to cut? What am I going to leave on the cutting room floor? And what am I going to focus on? And how do I tie these things together in a way that makes sense in my mind, that create this purpose? And so for me, that is, I want to help build generations who are spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart. Now, as a person of faith, sometimes we kind of stop with that first one, and we kind of think that, well, if a person has all the right beliefs, if they have the right spiritual beliefs, that emotional health and relational wisdom will just kind of happen by default. And I can just tell you, absolutely not the case. Now, I do believe that true emotional health and relational wisdom is always rooted in truth that God has given us. But it doesn't just happen by default. The book of Proverbs, I think, can basically kind of be summed up in two words: get smart. I mean, over and over throughout that book, we read to pursue knowledge and wisdom and understanding, to seek for it, to desire it, to go after it even more than great riches and wealth, because that is where the essence of life is found. There's nothing passive about becoming smart, about becoming emotionally healthy. It requires action on our part. And so as for me, being able to say, okay, this is my purpose. So I'm not going to write books on how to raise amazing goats. One, because I don't know the first thing about raising goats. Two, I don't have any interest in learning how to raise goats. But you know what? There are people who are so passionate and knowledgeable about goats. And that's the joy and the love that they bring into the world. And that allows me to walk into a store and to go, oh, look at this really incredible goat soap. Oh man, that looks like that would be just very luxurious, right? So all of us have these individual purposes that we need. And when you are dealing with other people, whether you are raising kids, you are running a company, or working in an organization, you have to have purpose at these two levels. One is, what's the purpose of your organization? What's the purpose of your family? How are you going to answer that big question? What's the purpose of your school? What's the purpose of your church? And companies that are successful and organizations that are successful, they spend a lot of time and often a lot of money getting really, really clear about their purpose. I think Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, resonated and became such a bestseller because it was really speaking about purpose. And as a culture, we have almost become afraid of saying that there should even be purpose, because we recognize that if my purpose as a Christian is to follow those two great commandments, to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love my neighbor as myself, then what do I say to the people who don't share my faith? Where are they going to find this purpose? And as we have become so ostracized from one another, and we have become rather paranoid, not just sensitive, not just appropriately sensitive, but paranoid of ever being able to say anything about purpose, we've actually stripped away from people something that they desperately need. And that is to be able to answer the big questions of why is anybody here? Not just why am I here, but why is anybody here? What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose for life? And then we need to be able to bring that down to these more individual levels. It's not enough to just answer the big questions. We have to also be able to bring it down to us as individuals, to our individual family, to us as individual people. And sometimes this is where things kind of fall apart, because we can rely on the big vision. Oh, well, our company, this is our big goal. This is our big aim. This is the reason why we exist. That can happen for a school or for a church. That can also happen in terms of our lives, only looking at the big picture in terms of matters of faith. But we also need to bring this down to, okay, but what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family? How am I going to help my child to not just answer those big questions, but then to see how their individual life fits in to those big questions? So we need to do both. We need to address purpose both from this big picture category, but we also need to be able to address it from as individuals. The problem is that life makes it easy to not do this. You can live all of your life and never really have to answer these questions. I don't think anybody ever escapes asking them, but we can distract our way into not having to answer them, not with courageous clarity. Because you see, what we can do is we can get caught up in just do the next thing. And this is true whether we have answered the big purpose questions about the meaning of life or not. So the people of faith aren't exempt from this process. As a matter of fact, because we have answered the big purpose questions, it actually can become a deterrent to not answering this at the more granular individual level. Because we can just get so focused on from the time that we're young, let's just do the next thing. Okay, or if we're a parent, for example, let's just get our kid to the next step. Okay, let's just get them potty trained. Okay, let's just now get them to learn to read. Now let's get them to learn to do math. Let's now get them through this next step. And then we're going to get through school and then through grade school. Now we're going to get through middle school. Now we're going to graduate high school. Then there's going to be college or trade school. Okay, then there's going to be, and it just continues to be the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So maybe it's to find a life partner. It's to buy the house, to settle down, to start the business, to make the money, to establish a retirement account, to get the cars, to get this, to do whatever. And it just becomes the next thing. Okay, now we're going to have kids. Now we're going to raise kids. And so now we're going to get them to this point. And this cycle can just repeat itself over and over and over again. But how many times does a person get to a certain point in their life? Sometimes it's around the middle of life where they kind of look back and go, is this it? Okay, well, I mean, I've done all the things. I've done all the steps. I've achieved to this. Why do I still feel like there's something missing? And that, again, that's not just true for people who do not answer those big purpose questions from a place of faith. This can happen to everyone. And even more tragically, this doesn't hit somebody until they are at the very end of their life. And then they're looking back on all their years. And they're looking back when there's very little, maybe no opportunity to make any course corrections. And it becomes, what was it all for? What was it all about? I mean, what difference did any of it make? But when we answer those questions about purpose, both at the big picture level and for us as individuals, then as we are going through the next phase and the next phase and the next phase, and whatever that looks like for each of us as individuals, then we see the next phase, we see that next step as part of something that's bigger. It's part of a bigger story. It's not an end in itself. It's part of this journey, this grand journey that we're on. I think that all of us have been invited to participate in this grand story that God wants to write with our lives. He doesn't force us into it. He gives us an invitation. It says, hey, I have this grand story. Would you like to come and be a part of this? And he has a role for each of us in that will bring us tremendous satisfaction. And we get a choice. We can say, yes, I'm going to show up for that, or we can say, no, I'm not. So I want to encourage you, be intentional to ask yourself, what is the purpose for life in general? Maybe you've already settled that. Maybe you have already answered that for yourself. If not, I encourage you, why? I mean, answer the question. Start with why. Why is anybody here? What difference does any of life make? And then answering that question, and my hope is that you will answer that question in the same way that I have, and that is through a relationship with our Creator and our Designer who loves us beyond all that we could ever think or ask or imagine. Then we need to take the next steps of what is my purpose in life here and now. Now, my purpose in this season of life is different than what it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I still had kids at home that needed to grow up. They needed me present in their life in a different way than they do now. So the specifics of my purpose have changed over time. The big picture hasn't, but the specific application of that purpose changes over time. But you know what? It will only change if we are intentional to continue asking that question. What's my purpose? How do I see that? How do I define that? How do I live that out? And I have noticed that as a person ages, that question gets harder to answer culturally. In some respects, it can become easier to answer if you have been growing in self-awareness and you have been on a good trajectory with your life. But culturally, there aren't as many answers that just get handed to you. Because again, when you're younger, there's just kind of these natural kind of next steps that you take. And life kind of says, oh, now your purpose in this season of life is X. It's to establish yourself in your career. It's to get an education. It's to find a life partner. It's to get yourself established in this way, to grow in a community. Maybe it's to have kids. Now it's to raise kids. Life kind of hands you those seasonal purposes. But when you get to a certain point in life, guess what? Life doesn't just start handing those out to you. And all of a sudden you discover you've got to go hunting for those. You've got to find and create those more for yourself. Some people navigate that transition well, and others, well, some people never really navigate that transition well. But my hope is that whatever season of life that you are in, that you will recognize throughout all human history, throughout every people group, one constant has been that people have a hardwired question. What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose? What's the point? Why are we here? And while that question has been answered numerous different ways over time, the one fact remains that question is embedded in every human heart. And if we are intentional to answer that question and to answer that in ways that align with truth, then we are going to be, it's going to have an impact in everything that we do. Just like carbon is present in so many parts of the environment and the world, and it's just part of every kind of life structure. When we have a good purpose, then it is embedded in every part of our life. We don't have to try to force it. It just becomes part of how we show up. And even when life puts pressure on us, that doesn't mean it can crush us. It means that it can refine, it can connect us in such a way that what is produced from that pressure is something of rare beauty, of great value, and of great use. Because, diamonds aren't just used for jewelry. I mean, you do know that, right? I mean, as something that is so hard, it can stand up to the weight and the pressure like few other compounds and elements in this world can. So, my friend, this is going to wrap up our series here. You're in the people business. And if you haven't had a chance yet to go back and listen to those other episodes, I encourage you to do that. And don't just kind of listen in the background, but really stop and think about how can you apply this in your life, in your home, in your family, in your business, in your organization. Because these 6 essential elements aren't just about life on earth. They are about a life, your one precious, wild life, your immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable impact. And what you're going to do with these 6 things will make all the difference in what you're going to do with that incredible impact that you have. All right, my friend, that's going to wrap us up for today. Hey, leave a rating and review. You can also go to the website, stephaniepresents.com, sign up for the newsletter there. And above all, remember this. You have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. And I hope that you will use it for godly impact because you can be spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart, and pass that down and influence generations. Bye for now.